massive piece of Greenland's ice cap just broke off from the ice sheet, and researchers are seriously concerned. The glacier is some 110 square kilometers in size, making it one of the most significant single losses of ice mass in Arctic history. To scientists, ecologists, and people who care about having an environment to live in, this is often considered pretty bad, but nations around the world and the corporations within them are seeing nothing but dollar signs. See, unlike the Antarctic, the Arctic is not a single impassable continent. It's an ice cap stretching down over several archipelagos and landmasses. For centuries, the Arctic has been nigh on impassable, as the ice is simply too thick and dangerous. But as the ice melts and the equator becomes unbearably hot, this ice will open up all sorts of new passageways through the Arctic. Claims over Arctic waterways are already being heavily sought as America, Russia, Canada, Norway, Denmark, and Finland jockey for position over who gets to control these potentially highly profitable trade routes. Next is the oldest DNA. A group of Danish researchers in Greenland made an incredible discovery, finding the oldest DNA ever. This fleck of genetic material was determined to be 2 million years old. That outstrips the previously oldest known DNA by 1 million years. The known history of life stretches back hundreds of millions of years, but only fossils, no DNA, can be recovered from that far back. This isn't just some shred of DNA either, but an actual readable genetic code, giving unparalleled insight into ancient biology. The researchers went into an area of Greenland where they were surrounded by 2-million-year-old mounds of dirt, and then began taking core samples. There were no fossils or remnants of bone, but by testing the soil, they were able to identify some actual strands of DNA. The special factor in Greenland, which allows DNA to survive for so long, are both the cold and minerals in the soil, which actually bind to the DNA and help to preserve it within the soil. It's unknown exactly where this DNA came from, but likely from one of any number of sources, as living creatures are shedding DNA constantly. Some of this, likely from excrement, was preserved inside the soil for 2 million years to eventually be discovered by these Danish researchers. Next is the microcontinent. It's estimated only 5% of the ocean has been observed, but that number is rapidly growing as scientists continue mapping the seafloor and making new discoveries. For instance, it was just recently discovered that there is in fact a microcontinent between Greenland and Canada, as a result of Greenland and Canada splitting apart, leading to the formation of the Davis Strait. This microcontinent began to be formed from the left-behind tectonic plate, now known as the Davis Strait microcontinent. This seems to indicate that tectonic plates are not solid masses, but can in fact fuse, split, and calve to form entirely new continents. Now, this isn't quite a full continent, in fact it's still a proto-microcontinent, but in another few million years this could very well become its own independent tectonic plate, influencing our world in as of yet unknown ways. Now, we won't be around to see it, and the formation has already been ongoing for 30 to 60 million years, but it is fascinating to understand that the world around us is continuing to change, that there is no end of history, and even if we're all gone, the fascinating tectonic movements of plates will continue on the Earth's crust. Next are new Greenland bears. Researchers were tasked with conducting a census and analysis of the polar bear population of Greenland, a population that is increasingly under threat. They would discover something totally different from their expectations though. Instead of the assumed single amorphous population covering the entire eastern coastline, it actually turns out there are two distinct and discrete polar bear populations in Greenland. The northeastern population has always been the most studied and most observed, as they're closest to human settlements, and it was assumed that they were emblematic of bears everywhere on the landmass, but this is not so. There's a southeastern population of bears that live among the mountainous and dangerous fjords in the south. This area is highly remote and heavily isolated, with no human habitation existing in the area, which of course made investigation and research quite difficult, but not impossible. So researchers spent several months tracking and even tagging polar bears in this harsh environment. Shockingly, there were quite high densities of polar bears in the the fjords, something which truly surprised the researchers as they did not expect such a healthy and robust population. After years of study, it was eventually observed that these bears hunted differently than the others, and almost never actually went out onto the sea ice, the traditional hunting ground of polar bears. This is because their sea ice is simply so fragmented and dangerous that it's no longer a viable environment for them to hunt within. These bears are a distinct population and likely haven't genetically mingled with the northern population for well over 200 years. Given enough time, these bears could well become their very own species. Next is the ice mélange. Ice melt is a concerning trend in the world's climate, as melting ice raises sea levels and releases even more CO2, worsening the greenhouse effect and impacting ocean currents as well as coastlines and ecosystems throughout the world. But scientists just discovered a rather concerning addition to the threat. It turns out significantly more Arctic ice sheet, especially around Greenland, has melted than we thought. In fact, it's shed about a fifth more of its ice mass in the last 4 decades than scientists thought it had. This is seriously concerning, as it seems to indicate the issue is already significantly worse than we had believed, and we believed it to be near catastrophic already. Many are saying the Arctic ice sheet is now beyond saving, and the best we can hope for is to mitigate the potential devastation and hold on for the ride. Of 207 glaciers studied in the report, 179 of them experienced a significant reduction in size since 1985. Most of this ice loss actually comes from below the water level, where it's harder to track and where warm water currents can carve up the glacier. The rate of glacier calving from the ice sheet has also increased significantly. And finally is an ancient tundra. Researchers spent weeks making their way to a buried mountain, then proceeded to carve through 2 miles of ice sheet before getting down to the dirt below. Once they got there, they were stunned to discover several fascinating fossils from a bygone age where the ice sheet around Greenland had actually melted and exposed the soil beneath, leading to a flourishing tundra ecosystem. But as the ancient ice melted, it also raised the sea level, meaning only the tallest points of Greenland were left above water, making it almost a sort of archipelago. They found some fossilized mosses and other fungi, as well as Arctic willow, but even more interestingly, they discovered an insect's leg and a compound eye, giving an excellent view into the small creatures in the ancient Greenland landmass. However, this has raised a lot of fears that a similar melting of the ice could lead to the same ecosystem. Now, to be fair, in 2,000 years, the ecosystem would recover and diversify beautifully, but that doesn't really make the people living along the coastline feel any better about losing their homes.
In 2015, Russian scientists made a discovery that stunned the world. 2 lion cubs perfectly preserved in the Siberian permafrost. But they weren't your typical lions. These cubs belonged to a long-extinct species known as the cave lion, which roamed Ice Age Eurasia. What made the discovery creepy was how well preserved they were. Skin, fur, internal organs, completely intact. One even had whiskers. Even more chilling, their sharp baby teeth suggested they were predators in the making, and possibly a warning of what else is still buried in the ice. In 2018, scientists drilling beneath Antarctica's ice shelf got more than they bargained for. They were expecting bacteria, but instead they found tiny, wiggling marine worms still alive, trapped for thousands of years in freezing dark waters beneath 2,400 feet of solid ice. Nicknamed zombie worms, these creatures had no eyes and survived off the bones of dead whales. The weirdest part? When brought to the surface, they were still alive. It was like something had kept them on pause until we hit play. Imagine coming face to face with a 9,000-year-old beast that looked like it died just yesterday. In 2011, a mummified bison was pulled from Siberia's Yukagir region. Unlike other fossilized finds, this thing was soft, with muscles, internal organs, and even blood vessels still visible. Scientists say it's the best preserved example of its kind ever found, but here's what freaked everyone out. It was in a perfect defensive posture, legs tucked under its body as if it saw death coming and braced for impact. In the Altai Mountains of Mongolia, archaeologists stumbled onto what looked like a human, but wasn't quite. In 2016, they uncovered the remains of a woman buried in ice for over 1,500 years. But something was off. Her body was covered in thick clothing made of felt and fur, but her hands were unusually long, and her feet were wrapped in strange leather boots that resembled hooves. Even more bizarre, locals believe the area was cursed, warning that, quote, demons guarded the body. The mummy's face had been partially frozen and disfigured, giving her a non-human, almost cryptid-like appearance. In 2007, a Japanese fishing vessel hauled up a deep-sea nightmare that had been flash frozen by Antarctic currents. What they found was a giant squid over 33 feet long, preserved in near-perfect condition. While that sounds impressive, what disturbed scientists was the state of its flesh. Bruised, slashed, and twisted as if it had been in a violent underwater battle. Some marine biologists even suggested it may have been attacked by something bigger, something we still haven't discovered. The carcass was frozen within minutes, locking it in a final, twisted pose. You'd think 42,000 years would be long enough for a creature to disappear from memory. Not this one. In 2007, Russian scientists discovered a female woolly mammoth calf named Lyuba in the frozen Yamal Peninsula. What made her special wasn't just the condition, she was almost perfectly preserved with eyelashes and internal organs, but here's the creepy part. Her stomach still contained her mother's milk. Scientists believe she suffocated in mud, then froze so quickly that her last meal never had time to digest, like she was just flash frozen right there in time. In the 1950s, a monastery in Nepal claimed to have part of a yeti hidden away, preserved in ice for generations. I don't know about you, but when I think of a yeti, I always think of the yeti from Monsters, Inc. Snow cone? When explorer Peter Byrne visited the Pangbosh Monastery in 1959, he managed to smuggle part of the mummified Yeti hand out to the west. It was large, leathery, and completely unlike a human or an ape. DNA tests later said it was human, but experts were definitely skeptical. Some believed the tests were rigged to just shut the case down and get everybody to stay quiet, and miraculously the hand disappeared shortly after being analyzed, and the rest of the Yeti remains were reportedly stolen, adding even more mystery to the creature's icy legend. What do you guys think? Yeti, real creature, or just the stuff of legends? In 2021, a Siberian team unearthed what looked like a deformed canine in the ice, only to realize that it actually had two skulls. At first glance, they thought it was just a twisted pose caused by decay, but CT scans actually confirmed the creature had two heads, two spines, and a single set of ribs. It was believed to be a rare Ice Age mutation, possibly caused by environmental stress or even possibly inbreeding. But here's where things get even crazier. The second head was fully formed with sharp teeth and all. Some researchers feared this wasn't a natural deformity, but evidence of ancient genetic experimentation gone wrong. Beneath the Antarctic ice, scientists discovered a fish so strange it shouldn't even be alive. Meet the crocodile icefish, which has no red blood cells and clear, antifreeze-like blood. These fish live in sub-zero temperatures where most animals would freeze solid in seconds. But here's the weirdest part. They evolved this way over millions of years and were found frozen in suspended animation, only to wake up when scientists revived them in lab tanks. The creatures looked alien, with bone-white bodies and hollow eyes, sparking debate over whether life on Earth even really started here. In 2019, a disturbing creature washed up near Casey Station in East Antarctica. Part seal, part something else. The carcass was bloated with blackened eyes and an unnaturally elongated jaw. Researchers said it looked like a mutated leopard seal, but its teeth didn't match. Some speculated deep-sea radiation exposure, others whispered about secret Antarctic labs, and when locals who saw the thing up close started getting sick, the body was whisked away by a government team and never seen again. What was it? Well, no one knows, but it left behind a trail of dead fish and unanswered questions.
In 2006, scientists made an extraordinary discovery at White Sands National Park in New Mexico. While walking along the park's gypsum dunes, they noticed these dark spots in the ground that looked like footprints. Not all that incredible on its own, but these were not just footprints. They actually turned out to be fossilized tracks left behind by animals and humans during the Ice Age. Over the next few years, there were excavations, and they found that there were animal footprints from animals like Harlan's ground sloth, which were these massive 10-foot sloths that weighed over a ton. They also found dire wolf prints, which were a species of large prehistoric canine, and then there were the human footprints. They were found in layers of sediment that had been preserved for thousands of years, and what's really cool is that this meant humans had been in North America much earlier than we previously thought. Radiocarbon dating showed that the human tracks were at least 22,000 years old. Before this, the belief was that humans only arrived about 13,000 to 16,000 years ago. In 2018, researchers discovered a set of footprints from a woman walking with a child. The tracks show her walking for almost a mile, occasionally carrying the youngster and then setting them down as they went. And there were other amazing prints as well. One set showed what looked like humans having stalked a giant sloth. It's just cool that they were able to form such specific scenes out of these prints. Helps us imagine what their daily lives might have been like. Just last year, a baby woolly mammoth named Yana was discovered in Siberia. This mammoth had been frozen in permafrost for 50,000 years, and her remains are the best preserved mammoth ever found. Yana was only about 6 months old when she died, and the preservation is incredible. Parts of her fur, skin, and trunk are still intact, and that's because the permafrost in Siberia acts like a giant freezer, preserving animals and plants that have been trapped in the ice even for thousands and thousands of years. And in more recent years, as more and more ice has been melting, discoveries like Yana are happening more often. What makes Yana so important, though, is that studying her can tell us a lot about how mammoths lived. They're able to learn about the cold environment she lived in based on her skin and fur, and her age means she most likely depended on her mother and other herd members to survive. A lot of mammoth remains are damaged or they're just incomplete, but Yana is giving scientists a chance to study a young mammoth in a lot more detail. Also in 2024, scientists made a huge breakthrough when they sequenced the genome of another woolly mammoth found in Siberia. This one had been frozen for 52,000 years. By sequencing the genome, they were able to form this kind of map of the mammoth's genetic makeup. And this is important because it opens the door to understanding the biology of woolly mammoths in a way that's never been possible before. The mammoth's DNA reveals a lot about how these ancient creatures were built, how they adapted to life in the freezing cold. For example, scientists can now see how the woolly mammoth's fur and fat layers were genetically programmed to survive the cold. And even crazier, this could help in de-extincting the woolly mammoth, basically using its DNA to bring it back. Scientists are trying to use the genetic code to potentially create woolly mammoths through things like cloning or genetic engineering. Yeah, this is actually becoming a real possibility now. Being able to study the mammoth's genome is also helping scientists learn more about how mammoths went extinct. By comparing mammoth DNA to modern elephants, researchers can track the genetic changes that happened over thousands of years and figure out why the furry guys disappeared. Next up is the discovery of Kennewick Man in 1996, a set of human remains found along the Columbia River in Washington. The remains were estimated to be over 9,000 years old. At first they thought the remains came from a member of a Native American tribe. There was a huge debate at the time. Native American tribes immediately claimed they were the bones of their ancestors and wanted them to be returned so they could bury them properly. On the other hand, scientists wanted to study the remains to learn more about early human migration. Well, in the end, the remains were studied further, and there were some fascinating findings. Genetic tests revealed that Kennewick Man's DNA was actually most closely related to people from the Pacific Rim, especially Japan. This was a bit of a curveball. The traditional theory was that the first settlers of the Americas came from Siberia across the Bering Land Bridge. Now it looked like they might have come from a completely different area. In 1916, a pretty controversial discovery was made in Vero Beach, Florida. Human bones were found buried alongside the remains of massive Ice Age animals like mastodons and mammoths. You can only imagine how blown away people would have been back in the day learning about this. The fact that human bones were mixed in with fossils of giant creatures painted this very wild picture. And the fact that humans were living alongside these ancient prehistoric beasts. The bones were radiocarbon dated to around 14,000 years old, which pushed the timeline of human arrival in the Americas back further than most experts were thinking at the time, and some people were pretty skeptical. Was this an authentic find or was it a hoax? Well, with the advancement of new testing techniques, it was later confirmed that the remains were indeed human. The discovery became a huge piece of evidence that humans lived at the same time as giant animals, much earlier than people thought, which only opened up other theories about how ancient humans spread across the continent. In Canada's Yukon, scientists have made some pretty amazing discoveries. Woolly mammoth and bison perfectly preserved in permafrost. Just like in Siberia, the icy ground here keeps animals' remains in pretty amazing condition. The preservation gives researchers this rare look at how these animals lived during the Ice Age. But it's not just mammoths and bison that have been found. The permafrost has also preserved prehistoric plants, insects, and parasites. The fact that these remains are so well preserved gives clues about what these creatures ate, how they behaved. For example, researchers can examine the mammoth's teeth and stomach contents to learn more about what they ate. In Egypt's Sahara Desert, there's a place called the Cave of Swimmers, famous for its ancient paintings. What's weird is a bunch of these images show what looks a lot like people swimming, which is strange because the Sahara is of course this dry, arid desert now, but it wasn't always that way. The paintings are believed to be about 10,000 years old, long before the Sahara became the desert that we know today. Back then, the area was much greener, with lakes, rivers, and plenty of plants, so plenty of wildlife could have lived there, including humans. The Cave of Swimmers tells us the Sahara's climate used to be much wetter, and it's kind of the bridge between the lush stretch of land it used to be and the desert we see now. The early humans who painted in these caves were likely some of the first to adapt to the changing environment. It's possible they may have even seen how things were changing and wanted to document their daily lives, leave something behind so that future generations would know what it was like before. But that's just my theory. In 2002, scientists made an incredible discovery at Blombos Cave in South Africa. They found some of the oldest known artwork in the world, pieces of ochre carved with intricate patterns that were around 75,000 years old. That is a very long time ago. So long ago that it completely changed our understanding of when humans first started to show signs of more modern behavior, like creating art. Along with the carvings, the cave also showed evidence of early tools and jewelry, objects that hint at this much more sophisticated, complex culture than we would have pictured for the time. Turns out, these early humans were capable of symbolic thinking. They were forming social structures and using creativity in ways we just hadn't expected. Basically, we thought that they were just really dumb. The extinction of Ice Age animals like mammoths, saber-toothed cats, and giant sloths has always been a tricky topic. Some scientists think humans hunted these animals to extinction. Others say climate change is to blame, but recent discoveries are giving us a more clear picture. In 2020, a study of Ice Age bones showed that the megafauna were wiped out by this mix of human hunting and drastic climate changes. The animals were already struggling because the climate was warming when humans started hunting them, and that combination led to their disappearance in North America and Europe. But the extinction might not have happened all at once. In some places, animals like mammoths stuck around longer than we thought. Some even survived until about 4,000 years ago. For centuries, the native Paiute people of Nevada told stories of giant, pale-skinned invaders called the Sitka. These giants were said to be fierce, red-headed warriors who arrived in the region thousands of years before, attacking local tribes. The legend says that the tribes eventually teamed up, chased the giants into a cave, and wiped them out. These stories seemed like mere myth until bones started turning up in Lovelock Cave. In 1911, two miners discovered what looked like huge human skeletons in the cave. Some of these skeletons were reportedly between 7 and 8 feet tall. More excavations in 1912 and 1924 unearthed thousands of artifacts, including a giant sandal measuring 15 inches long, which seemed to support the idea that something unusual had happened there. But that wasn't all. A large handprint embedded in the cave's rock was also found, and it was about twice the size of an average human hand. And then in 1931, the Nevada Review Minor reported the discovery of 2 mummified skeletons in a dry lake bed near Lovelock, allegedly measuring between 8.5 and 10 feet tall, covered in red hair. Here's something you probably wouldn't be expecting to see on this list: ancient camels. Believe it or not, camels actually first appeared in North America more than 40 million years ago. Over time, they split into 2 main groups: the camels we know today and the relatives, llamas and alpacas. The camels made their way across the Bering Land Bridge, while llamas and alpacas moved south. But there was another species, the Camelops hasturnus, which stuck around in North America until the Ice Age. Some of these camels roamed as far south as Honduras, while others made it all the way to Alaska and the Yukon. In 2008, gold miners in Alaska discovered some Ice Age bones, which turned out to belong to this extinct camel species. The bones were so well preserved in the cold that researchers managed to extract DNA. Imagine a 6-foot-long beaver weighing 220 pounds. Ice Age giant beavers had 6-inch long front teeth. They would have looked like fierce predators, but they didn't eat meat. This massive rodent was about the size of a black bear and had a tail that resembled a muskrat's rather than today's typical beaver tail. A 2019 study looked at fossils from the Yukon and Ohio dating back 10,000 to 50,000 years and revealed that the giant beaver's diet consisted mostly of aquatic plants. Tessa Plint, a researcher with Heriot-Watt University, explained that by studying the chemical makeup of fossilized bones and teeth, scientists can figure out what an animal ate even tens of thousands of years later. Understanding the diet of these ancient animals helps them learn more about how climate change affected them. As the earth warmed and dried, the giant beaver couldn't compete with smaller, more adaptable beavers that survived. In 2010, a team of Russian scientists found a well-preserved mammoth in Siberia, later named Yuka. She was a young mammoth, about 6 to 8 years old, and she lived around 39,000 years ago. Yuka's body was in really good shape. Its body measured about 2.5 meters long, and it was remarkably intact, with her trunk, bones, some of her flesh, hair, and eyes still preserved, making her one of the most well-preserved mammoth specimens ever found. Pretty incredible to see. I haven't seen it in person, but based on pictures and video that I've seen of it, it's crazy how well preserved it is. They think she might have fallen into a mud pit or drowned, which helped preserve her so well. People probably butchered her for meat, too, as there were cut marks on her bones. In 2002, an amazing discovery was made in northern Siberia. The remains of a woolly mammoth were found frozen in the permafrost near the Siberian village of Yukagir. The specimen, which was an adult male, turned out to be in remarkable condition. This mammoth's head, still covered in skin, was so well preserved that it looked almost fresh. When polar explorer Bernard Bouygues heard about the find, he led a team to retrieve the mammoth's remains. The team made 3 trips to the site, carefully gathering pieces of the mammoth's body and putting them together. Gave scientists a ton of information about woolly mammoths. For example, they discovered that the mammoth had temporal glands between its eyes and ears. These glands would have helped regulate body temperature. The mammoth's feet were also a key find. The soles had deep cracks in it, which would have helped the animal grip icy surfaces while walking. A specimen also included the tusks, front legs, and even parts of the stomach and intestines. Based on the size of its bones and tusks, scientists estimated that this mammoth was over 9 feet tall at the shoulder and weighed around 4 to 5 tons. Scimitar cats, or Homotheriums, were fierce prehistoric predators. Their fossils are rare. Because of this, scientists used to think that they were part of a small population. That changed in 2011 when a bone was found in permafrost at a mining site near Dawson City in Canada. This bone belonged to a scimitar cat, not a saber-toothed cat, which are often confused with scimitar cats. Scimitar cats had shorter, curved teeth that were serrated, unlike the long, flat teeth of saber-tooths. What made this find even more exciting was how well preserved the bone was in the ice. Researchers at the University of Copenhagen were able to sequence the entire genome from this bone. Their genetic makeup hints towards a scimitar-toothed cats as being highly skilled hunters, said Michael Westbury, an evolutionary genomicist at the University of Copenhagen, going on to say they, quote, likely had very good daytime vision and displayed complex social behaviors, end quote. These cats also had adaptations for endurance. Their bones and cardiovascular systems were strong. They were built for long-distance running, and based on this, researchers believe scimitar cats hunted in packs, wearing down their prey during the day. Scientists estimated the specimen was over 47,500 years old. Scimitar cats likely went extinct around 10,000 years ago, along with many of the animals that they hunted, like mammoths and woolly rhinos. Most people think of hyenas as the scavengers of Africa, but the ancient Arctic also had its share of these creatures as well. These ancient hyenas lived over 5 million years ago, and its remains have been found around the world, from Mongolia to Kansas to Mexico. In 2019, evolutionary biologist Jack Sang analyzed a pair of fossilized hyena teeth from the Yukon. He quickly identified them as belonging to a species that once roamed the ancient Arctic. These teeth likely belonged to a hyena that lived around 850,000 to 1.4 million years ago. This hyena was equipped with teeth perfect for crushing bones, probably feeding on ancient caribou, bison, and maybe even baby mammoths. Eventually, these hyenas disappeared, and researchers think they were outcompeted by other Ice Age predators like the short-faced bear or bone-crushing dog. Never heard of those before till today. What an awesome name. In 2018, miners working at Hester Creek in the Yukon discovered a mummified squirrel, perfectly preserved from around 30,000 years before. At first, this lump of fur, claws, and limbs didn't look like much, but scientists examined it more and realized that they'd found an Arctic ground squirrel that had died during hibernation. Researchers nicknamed the squirrel Hester after the area where it was discovered, and it's amazing to think that this little guy was running around the Yukon several thousand years ago, said museum representatives. When the mummified squirrel was first found, its exact identity wasn't clear until the team noticed little hands, claws, and a tail. Grant Zazula, a paleontologist from the Yukon government, was part of the team that studied the squirrel, saying, "It's not quite recognizable until you see those little hands and these claws, and you see a little tail, and then you see ears." The team figured that Hester was likely hibernating when it died. Arctic ground squirrels curl up into balls like this, one when they hibernate in underground dens, often lined with nests made of leaves. These nests are usually found empty, so finding one with an actual squirrel inside was pretty cool. To avoid damaging the specimen, they decided not to unravel the ball of fur. Instead, they had it x-rayed by a local veterinarian who'd expected the bones to be in pretty bad condition, but when the x-ray results came in, the squirrel's skeleton was actually in great condition, and it looked nearly identical to a modern Arctic ground squirrel. In 2021, scientists discovered a tiny microscopic creature that had been frozen in Siberian permafrost for over 24,000 years. The team found it buried 11.5 feet deep. The little animal was what's called a belloid rotifer, and despite being frozen solid for thousands of years, it actually came back to life, and on top of that, it was still able to reproduce. Rotifers are tough little creatures. They typically live in freshwater or moist soil and are known for surviving in extreme conditions like radiation, dehydration, low oxygen, and freezing temperatures. To confirm its age, scientists radiocarbon dated the soil surrounding the critter. Stas Malaven, a co-author of the study, couldn't believe it, saying, "We revived animals that saw woolly mammoths," which is quite impressive. I agree. Next on the list we have Sanek. In 2021, there was a pretty amazing discovery in Greenland, a new dinosaur. New in that we didn't know it existed, not a living dinosaur, sadly. Researchers identified a previously unknown dinosaur species based on well-preserved skulls. This newfound species was named Isi Sanek, meaning cold bone in Greenlandic Inuit. The remains of this creature date back to the late Triassic period, about 214 million years ago. The skulls were first found in 1994, and at the time they were believed to belong to a Plateosaurus, but recent advancements in research techniques, including micro-CT scans, showed that these skulls actually belonged to a different dino altogether, a dinosaur that was different from any known species. To visualize the full form of the skulls, researchers used digital modeling after the micro-CT scans. These were bipedal herbivores, medium-sized, and shared a lot of similarities with sauropods. Those are those long-necked, giraffe-looking dinosaurs you probably remember from Jurassic Park. But the Isi Sanek would have been a lot smaller than them. They're pretty cool-looking dinosaurs, almost like a sauropod mixed with a velociraptor, at least to me. In 2016, scientists discovered a 12,400-year-old mummified puppy. This puppy was discovered in the permafrost along a river in Siberia. Researchers believe the puppy died in a landslide and its body became preserved in the ice. Its fur was intact, and the body, from its nose to its tail, was almost completely preserved. The only part that wasn't in perfect condition was the brain, which had started to decompose, but even still, about 70 to 80% of the brain was still intact. This puppy is one of the few animals in the Pleistocene era which has a well-preserved brain. While there have been other dog fossils found from the same time period, they were too decomposed to study. The puppy's condition is especially special because its brain could help researchers learn more about ancient animals. In fact, they were saying at the time that they could potentially use the DNA and tissues from this puppy to bring it back to life, which would have been nuts. Along with the frozen puppy, human tools were found near the site, meaning that this dog was domesticated and owned by people. In March of 2011, Sean Funk, a shovel operator at a mine in Fort McMurray, Alberta, was digging when he made an amazing discovery. A discovery that turned out to be Alberta's oldest dinosaur fossil and one of the best preserved ever found in the entire world. Honestly, this has to be the most amazing dinosaur discovery that I've ever read about. And I think Don Henderson, curator of dinosaurs at the Royal Tyrrell Museum, agrees, saying at the time, "Right away we knew it was going to be something good, but we had no idea how good it was going to be." So after getting the fossil back to the museum, Don and his team got to work, and 6 years later the dinosaur was named Borealopelta markmicheli. The name Borealopelta means shield of the north, and the species name honors Mark Mitchell, the museum technician who spent over 7,000 grueling hours removing the dinosaur from rock. Now, I'm not done with this one. There's just too much to talk about with this discovery to cram it into one point. So as I said, the Borealopelta was incredibly well preserved. It was covered in thick armor, especially around its neck. It also had these massive 20-inch spikes at the shoulders that were assumed to be for fighting, but Victoria Arbour, a curator of paleontology, also thought they might have been a display of health and strength, similar to the horns of a bull or tusks of an elephant. Now here's what's utterly crazy to me though. This dinosaur was so intact, they were able to see what was in its stomach. There were twigs and ferns in there, suggesting it ate during the wet season. Scientists think it could have been swept away by a flash flood, eventually sinking to the bottom of the sea. The body would have flipped over and sank, with its thick back and bloated belly causing it to be preserved in sediment, creating a natural time capsule that kept it safe for 110 million years. Here's another crazy thing about this find though. They were even able to determine, to a certain degree, what color the creature was. Most of the fossil was covered in relatively well-preserved skin, and from this, they were able to study pigment cells called melanosomes. Melanosomes are seen in nature all the time. It's what gives many modern-day animals unique markings like spots and stripes. It's rare to see melanosomes in fossils, but again, Borealopelta was especially well preserved. At least one component of Borealopelta's color was this reddish brown, said Caleb Brown from the Royal Tyrrell Museum. The color on its back may have been part of a camouflage pattern called countershading, helping it blend into its environment and avoid predators. Now also in 2011, a team of paleontologists led by William Hammer discovered a new species of ancient dinosaur in the frozen mountains of Antarctica, an area that's usually thought of as one of the coldest places on Earth, but of course millions of years ago it was much warmer. The dinosaur was small, around 4 to 5 feet long, and had bird-like hip bones. It was likely related to early plant eaters like the Ferbosaur and Heterodontosaur, which were the ancestors of larger and more famous dinos like Stegosaurus and Ankylosaurus. The fossils were found on Mount Kirkpatrick, part of the central transatlantic mountains. Hammer and his team uncovered a leg and foot, but they weren't sure if they had found the dinosaur's head. It would take about a year to fully understand what they'd found. Thomas Holtz, a geology professor at the University of Maryland, noted that the find could help fill gaps in both dinosaur evolution and the ancient Antarctic environment, saying that this discovery was from a time when dinosaurs were just starting to take over, comparing these early small plant eaters to rabbits, fast, common and without armor, but important to the overall evolution of the giant plant eaters that came later. Finding fossils in Antarctica is extremely challenging because of the harsh conditions and short research window. Hammer had been trying to return to the site since 1990, but bad weather and helicopter problems cut short his 2003 trip. As Holtz put it, anytime we find fossils there, it's a brand new species. It's practically unexplored territory. So these weren't the only dino remains William Hammer discovered in the mountains of Antarctica. In 1990, he and his team discovered a 22-foot meat-eating dinosaur called Cryolophosaurus. This was a big deal because it was the first dinosaur ever found in Antarctica. Cryolophosaurus was a meat-eating dinosaur that lived around 190 million years ago during the early Jurassic period. It was about 20 to 23 feet long, 6 to 7 meters, and weighed roughly 1,000 pounds. What really sets this dinosaur apart was its unique crest. The crest, found on the top of its head, had a very unusual shape, kind of like a frozen backwards mohawk. There are like two kind of things here. It's believed that the crest could have been used for display, either to attract mates or to communicate with other members of its species. As Hammer put it, it looked like a frozen crested reptile, which is how they got the name Cryolophosaurus, meaning frozen crested lizard. And again, in the early 1990s, William Hammer of Augustana College discovered more incredible fossils on Mount Kirkpatrick. These particular fossils included parts of a foot, leg, and ankle bones from a long-necked dinosaur that lived around 190 million years ago. It wasn't until much later, though, that the fossil was identified. The fossils were painstakingly removed from the ice and rock using jackhammers, rock saws, and chisels under extremely difficult conditions, said Nathan Smith, a graduate student at the Field Museum in Chicago. After a lot of hard work, Smith and paleontologist Diego Pohl realized they'd found a new species of dinosaur, which they named Glacialosaurus hammeri. This dinosaur was about 20 to 25 feet long and would have weighed between 4 to 6 tons. It belonged to a group called sauropodomorphs, which includes some of the largest dinosaurs ever. Think of those massive-sized, long-necked plant eaters. Around 20,000 years ago, a young woolly rhinoceros was going about its day in what's now northern Siberia. It was probably foraging for food when it made an oopsie and drowned in a river. Fast forward to 2020, and that same woolly rhino became a huge discovery for scientists. As rising temperatures cause permafrost to melt, creatures like this long extinct rhino are being uncovered, giving researchers a glimpse into prehistoric times. Permafrost is a layer of soil that's been frozen for thousands of years, great for preserving ancient remains. The woolly rhino's carcass was found by a local farmer in Yakutia, Siberia, about 15,000 years after the species went extinct. The fossil was incredibly well preserved, with its fur, hooves, and internal organs still intact. But what made this discovery even more special was the rhino's horn, which is rarely found in such good condition because cartilage usually decomposes relatively quickly. In 2018, a local man named Pavel Efimov made an incredible discovery in Siberia: the severed head of a giant wolf, perfectly preserved beneath the permafrost. But this wolf was nearly 40,000 years old. It wasn't until 2019 that researchers started studying it in detail. The big question they were trying to answer was whether the wolf's head had been chopped off by humans or separated by ice. The cut on the wolf's neck wasn't what you'd expect from ice separation. It was rougher, less smooth, meaning it might have been made by something like a tool. The severed head is quite large, measuring about 40 centimeters, much bigger than the typical 25 centimeter head of a modern Siberian wolf. It had a thick mammoth-like coat, sharp fangs, and some parts of its skull seemed more developed than today's wolves. In 2016, ornithologist Stephen Emsley made a surprising find during a research trip in Antarctica. He stumbled on ancient penguin remains at Cape Urzar near the Ross Sea, and what he discovered there was unlike anything he'd seen before. Now, at first, Emsley was researching ancient penguin remains at the site, following a lead about penguin droppings. He didn't expect to find much, since explorers like Robert Falcon Scott and Ernest Shackleton hadn't recorded any any penguin sightings in the area, but when Emsley arrived, he found something unexpected: white splotchy guano stains and loose chick bones, which usually indicate that a penguin colony had recently occupied the site, but that wasn't the case. Investigating further, he found complete penguin chick carcasses and even intact mummies. The site must have been covered by snow and ice soon after the colony was last abandoned, preserving the surface remains for centuries, Emsley went on to write. The site had been used by penguins at different times in the past, with carbon dating showing it was occupied 3 times starting around 5,000 years ago. The site's location and the penguins' repeated visits were likely because of changing ice conditions, which would open and close the coast to the penguins. Emsley believes that this area could potentially see penguins returning in the future as climate change melts the sea ice earlier each summer, giving them access to the coast again. In 2018, some fossil ivory hunters in northeastern Siberia made a pretty cool discovery. While digging into the permafrost, they unearthed the carcass of a bird, but this bird was a 46,000-year-old specimen, perfectly frozen in time. The discovery was sent to paleontologist Love Dallin and a team of researchers at the Swedish Museum of Natural History. The bird is believed to be an ancestor of the horned lark, which is found in places like northern Russia and Mongolia today. It's a cool find though, the first bird of its kind ever to be discovered. The fact that the bird was almost completely intact made it one of the best preserved ancient animals ever found. The bird was found near Balaya Gora, a village in Yakutia, an area known as the Pole of Cold because of its extremely cold winters, sometimes reaching as low as -60 degrees Fahrenheit, which is roughly -50 degrees Celsius. That is just too cold. The researchers think that the end of the last ice age led to the formation of a new subspecies of animals like this bird. The discovery adds to a list of well-preserved creatures found in the same area, like a 42,000-year-old foal and an 18,000-year-old puppy, both of which I've talked about in previous videos. In 2007 and 2008, 2 baby mammoths, later named Lyuba and Chroma, were found in Siberia. They were so well preserved that researchers were able to piece together how they died, even though both calves, one about 1 month old and the other 2 months old, died more than 40,000 years ago. Scientists used CT scans to find that the 2 mammoths probably choked on mud after falling into water. Daniel Fisher, a co-author of the study, stated the mud was like a really thick batter that they got clogged in their trachea and they were unable to dislodge by coughing. Basically preserved them from taking another breath. Lyuba and the 1-month-old calf was discovered by a reindeer herder. Chroma was found in 2008, frozen upright in permafrost. Scavengers had eaten parts of her heart, lungs, and skull. But both mummies still showed a neonatal line on their teeth, a marker of stress during birth, which helped scientists estimate their ages. CT scans of Lyuba showed signs of what's called a mammalian dive reflex, showing that she fell through the ice into a muddy lake where she tried to clear the mud from her airways but eventually suffocated. Chroma, who had a belly full of breast milk, also had mud in her trachea, but her death is a bit less cut and dry. But according to researchers, it's possible she fell into a river, broke her back, and was then buried in mud while trying to escape. In 2015, scientists in Siberia discovered a baby woolly rhino, perfectly preserved in a frozen riverbank. Nicknamed Sasha after the man who found it, the rhino calf is the most complete specimen of its kind ever discovered. Sasha lived around 10,000 years ago, was about 1.5 meters long, or almost 5 feet, and 0.8 meters high, about 2.6 feet, much smaller than the fully grown adults, which could reach up to 15 feet long. According to Albert Protopopov from the Yakutian Academy of Sciences, baby woolly rhinos are incredibly rare to find, so this was a pretty amazing discovery, especially because it helps researchers learn more about the early life of these animals, which they didn't really know much about before. Woolly rhinos went extinct around 10,000 years ago. Climate change and habitat loss likely led to their extinction, but some scientists also think overhunting may have been a part of it. Around 30,000 years ago in Siberia, a tiny cave lion cub was making its way across the tundra when a sudden mudslide or crack in the permafrost caused the cub to fall and get trapped. The cub was buried in ice, preserving her fur, skin, and organs in almost perfect condition. This poor cub, later named Sparta, was discovered by mammoth tusk hunters in 2017, poking out of the melting permafrost in Yakutia, Siberia. Sparta is probably the best preserved Ice Age animal ever found, said Love Dallin, one of the study's co-authors, going on to say that even her whiskers were preserved. Sparta died about 28,000 years ago, and she was actually found alongside another cub named Boris, who was even older, dying around 43,000 years ago. Both cubs were about 1 to 2 months old when they died, with their sharp teeth just starting to emerge. Cave lions were closely related to modern African lions and lived across the northern hemisphere during the Ice Age. Unlike today's lions, though, these were, of course, adapted to freezing cold weather. In 2020, a perfectly preserved bear mummy was discovered in the Siberian permafrost. Siberia again. But anyway, it wasn't quite what scientists expected. At first, researchers thought they'd found the remains of a giant extinct cave bear, but eventually they realized the bear was much younger and from a completely different species. The bear was found by reindeer herders on a remote island in the East Siberian Sea. It was so well preserved that scientists could still see its skin, fur, claws, teeth, nose, internal organs, and even body fat. The remains were named the Antarctica bear after a nearby river. At first, researchers at the Lazarev Mammoth Museum believed the bear was a cave bear, a massive species that went extinct about 22,000 years ago, but this bear was only about 3,460 years old. Turned out to be a young female brown bear standing just over 5 feet tall and weighing around 172 pounds. It was probably around 2 to 3 years old when it died. The bear's stomach contents revealed it had been eating plants and birds, with feathers still found inside its belly, which is incredible when you think about it. It also had signs of spinal injuries, which may have contributed to its death. In 2016, a gold miner in Yukon, Canada discovered something frozen in the ice. It turned out to be an ancient wolf pup, which had been almost perfectly preserved for 57,000 years. The mummified gray wolf, known as Zur, was found in the Klondike goldfields near Dawson City. Lead researcher Julie Machin, an anatomy professor, called it, quote, the most complete wolf specimen ever found from the Ice Age, going on to say all her soft tissue, her hair, her skin, even her little nose is still there. She's just complete, and that is really rare. Using radiocarbon dating and DNA analysis, scientists confirmed Zur died at just 7 weeks old. The remains were especially important because they were discovered in North America, unlike most finds in Siberia, as you've seen from this list, which are harder to access. Machen and her team were able to link Zur's DNA to both ancient Beringian wolves from Yukon and Russian gray wolves, which means that ancient wolves from North America and Eurasia mixed. Zur's remains also showed them what Ice Age wolves ate. The assumption had always been that they mostly ate bison or oxen, but as it turned out, this wolf mostly consumed aquatic animals, much like modern wolves in Alaska. In 2011, members of a tribe in northern Siberia found the remains of a steppe bison, perfectly preserved after being frozen for nearly 10,000 years. The bison was transported to the Yakutian Academy of Sciences, where scientists began to study it. Unlike other bison mummies discovered over the years, this one was almost entirely intact, with its internal organs in remarkable condition. Olga Potapova, collections curator at the mammoth site of Hot Springs, explained that while bison mummies are not uncommon, they're usually incomplete, saying, quote, normally what you find with mummies of megafauna is partial carcasses, but this mummy was preserved so well that it earned a record for the level of its preservation. The bison, which was probably about 4 years old when it died, looked like it had starved to death. There was no fat around its abdomen, but its heart and digestive systems were pretty intact, even though some organs had shrunk over time. Researchers even managed to extract tissue samples from each organ, and for the first time ever, they found steppe bison brain tissue still preserved. In 2022, a nearly perfectly mummified baby woolly mammoth was discovered by a miner in the permafrost of Canada's Klondike goldfields. dating back around 30,000 years. The calf, thought to be around 1 month old when it died, was a female and measured just 4.5 feet long. Researchers described it as the most complete mummified mammoth found in North America. A lot of its skin and hair was still intact. As an Ice Age paleontologist, it had been one of my lifelong dreams to come face to face with a real woolly mammoth, said Grant Zazula, a paleontologist with the Yukon government, going on to describe the mammoth as, quote, one of the most incredible mummified Ice Age animals ever discovered in the world. The discovery happened when a mine worker hit something unexpected while digging. The team stopped all their work and brought in geologists who managed to recover the mammoth's remains, and just in time because a storm had been rolling in. Analysis suggested that the mammoth may have died after getting trapped in mud while grazing, with grass found in her stomach. In 2018, yet another incredible discovery was made in Siberia. The nearly perfectly preserved mummified remains of an Ice Age horse, believed to have died between 30,000 and 40,000 years ago. Its body was so well preserved that even tiny details like the hairs in its nostrils and around its hooves were still visible. The foal was found deep in a crater, about 328 feet or 100 meters deep, during an expedition in Yakutia. It was around 2 months old when it died. The mummified body was almost entirely intact, with no visible damage. Scientists collected samples from the foal's hair and tissue and found it belonged to an extinct species known as the Lena horse, which was genetically distinct from the wild horses that still roam the area today. This species lived in Siberia tens of thousands of years ago and disappeared long before modern horses evolved. In 2016, biologist Steve Emsley was in southern Antarctica when he came across something kind of confusing. It looked to be a recently abandoned Adelie penguin colony. There were mummified chicks, guano stains, pebbles from nests, but the thing is, Adelie penguins hadn't been spotted in the region for centuries. What Emsley soon discovered was that the penguin remains were far older than anyone could have imagined. Radiocarbon dating of the bones, eggshells, and mummified skin showed that these penguins had been dead for thousands of years. The rapidly melting ice in Antarctica revealed these ancient penguin remains. The penguins had likely settled in the area during warmer periods when the sea ice melted early, allowing the birds to reach the area and build their nests. The most recent colony, which had been buried during the Little Ice Age about 800 years ago, was finally uncovered as the region's ice began to recede. What you're looking at here is a tardigrade, aka a water bear. Now, is this a newly discovered alien species? Well, I wish, but no, these things actually exist right here at home. They're just really, really tiny, which I'm thankful for, because imagine if that alien-looking thing was the size of just even a regular house cat. That would just be horrifying. Tardigrades, nicknamed water bears, are one of the most resilient animals on the planet. They're microscopic animals that are known for their ability to survive in very extreme conditions all over the world. In places like Antarctica, they've been found frozen in ice for thousands of years. And what's amazing about these things is their ability to go into a kind of state of suspended animation. When conditions are harsh, like extreme cold or dryness, tardigrades dry out or freeze and enter a kind of hibernation. And when researchers thaw them out, they can come back to life. Water bears have even survived space travel in this dormant state. This makes them one of the toughest known organisms in the world.
Our first discovery takes us straight to one of the most iconic creatures of the Ice Age, the woolly mammoth. Scattered across Siberia's permafrost, nearly complete carcasses have been uncovered, offering an unparalleled glimpse into a prehistoric world. These aren't just piles of bones. Many specimens still carry clumps of shaggy hair, remnants of skin, and even traces of blood. Scientists have been able to extract genetic materials from these remains, sparking debates about the possibility of de-extinction and cloning. Beyond their sheer size and grandeur, these mammoths also carry clues about their diets and the ecosystems they roamed. Detailed tissue analysis have revealed microbial communities that once thrived inside of these giants, providing unexpected insights into the complex interplay between Ice Age megafauna and their environment. Every frozen mammoth found in Siberia is like a time capsule, inviting us to piece together the puzzle of life in a world long past. Next up is one of the most hair-raising discoveries, a 30,000-year-old virus revived from Siberian permafrost. Dubbed Pithovirus sibericum, this giant virus is one of the largest ever found, and its revival in a controlled laboratory setting stunned scientists worldwide. Unlike most viruses that are quickly degraded by time, Pithovirus lay dormant, perfectly preserved in ice. Its reawakening not only highlights the incredible resilience of viral particles, but also raises some important questions about the risks of ancient pathogens re-emerging as global temperatures rise. Researchers are studying its structure and genetic makeup to understand how viruses evolve over millennia. While there's no immediate danger to modern life, the discovery underscores the delicate balance between nature's hidden past and the challenges of our changing climate. Siberia's permafrost isn't just a graveyard for large creatures, it's also a sanctuary for tiny, resilient bacteria. Scientists have isolated bacterial strains that have been dormant for tens of thousands of years, reviving them in laboratory experiments. One such strain belongs to a group of bacillus species known for their extraordinary survival skills in extreme conditions. These microbes have adapted in a way that allow them to withstand not only freezing temperatures, but also high radiation and low nutrient levels. The genetic makeup of these ancient bacteria is revealing unexpected adaptations, mechanisms that could inspire new biotechnological applications, from novel antibiotics to enzymes that function under harsh industrial conditions. Such discoveries provide a fascinating look at the resilience of life and the possibility that even the simplest organisms can thrive in the most unforgiving environments. Their story is a testament to nature's ingenuity and the enduring legacy of life through the ages. Deep beneath the Siberian surface lie ice cores that are nothing short of climate history books. These long cylindrical samples of ice have trapped layers of air, dust, and even volcanic ash from thousands of years ago. By analyzing these tiny bubbles of ancient atmosphere, scientists can reconstruct the Earth's climate history in astonishing detail. These ice cores reveal shifts in greenhouse gas concentrations, temperature fluctuations, and even clues about past solar activity. For instance, layers enriched with volcanic ash hint at massive eruptions that temporarily cooled the planet, while varying gas compositions tell stories of natural climate cycles. Beyond their importance for understanding global warming, these records provide a baseline against which we can measure human impact on today's climate. Each layer in an ice core is like a page in Earth's diary, a narrative that not only informs us about the distant past, but also guides our predictions for the future. It's kind of like a perfect blend of history, science, and a little bit of detective work hidden in the ice. Siberia's frozen expanses aren't just a repository for terrestrial relics, they are also a treasure trove of space rocks. The continent's harsh climate means that meteorites, which might otherwise weather away in warmer regions, remain pristinely preserved in ice. Over the decades, meteorite hunters and scientists have uncovered fragments that offer invaluable clues about the early solar system. One particularly intriguing meteorite revealed unusual isotopic compositions, sparking fresh theories about how our solar system formed and evolved. These cosmic visitors are like natural laboratories, each carrying the chemical signatures of processes that predate even the Earth itself. Their study not only helps us understand the building blocks of our planet, but also inform us about the wider universe. Hidden within the icy tombs of the Altai Mountains lies one of Siberia's most enchanting archaeological finds, the Ice Maiden. This remarkably preserved mummy, discovered among the burial mounds of the ancient Prehistoric culture, offers an intimate look at a lost world. The Ice Maiden's delicate tattoos, intricately embroidered clothing, and ornate jewelry provide a window into the spiritual and daily life of these nomadic peoples. Her burial site, complete with ceremonial artifacts, suggests that she held a significant position within her community. The precision of her preservation has allowed scientists to study not just her physical attributes, but also the materials and techniques used in her adornments, sparking debates about trade routes and cultural exchanges in the ancient world. world. The Ice Maiden is definitely more than a frozen body. It's like a storyteller whose silent whispers continue to intrigue historians and archaeologists, revealing the artistry and sophistication of a people long forgotten. Among the icy relics of Siberia are seeds that have withstood the test of time. Literally. Preserved in permafrost for thousands of years, these seeds have occasionally shown the ability to germinate under the right conditions. Scientists are fascinated by these natural time capsules as they hold the genetic blueprints of ancient plant species that once thrived in a very different world. By comparing these ancient seeds with their modern descendants, researchers can trace evolutionary changes and shifts in plant biodiversity over millennia. In controlled experiments, some of these seeds have sprouted, offering a rare opportunity to study traits that might have been lost over time. These findings not only provide insights into the resilience of life, but also raise intriguing questions about de-extinction and biodiversity conservation. In the frozen depths of Siberia, every seed is a whisper from the past, a living relic that connects us to ecosystems long vanished, yet still influential in today's world. Not all the frozen giants of Siberia were herbivores. Among the finds are the formidable remains of cave lions, the apex predators of the Ice Age. These predators, whose fossils have been remarkably well preserved in permafrost, offer critical insights into the evolution and adaptations of large carnivores. Detailed studies of their bones reveal specialized features, robust jaw structures, powerful limbs, and unique skull formations that hint at their hunting strategies and social behavior. Cave lions roamed vast territories, and their remains help scientists piece together the ecological dynamics of ancient predator-prey relationships. Beyond their role in the food chain, these fossils also allow researchers to explore genetic links between extinct species and their modern relatives, deepening our understanding of evolutionary biology. Every bone and claw encased in Siberian ice is a fragment of a larger story about survival, adaptation, and the relentless march of time in one of Earth's most extreme environments. While the giants of the Ice Age often steal the spotlight, the tiniest creatures can be just as revealing. Deep in the Siberian ice, scientists have uncovered an array of insect fossils, delicate remnants that offer a window into ancient ecosystems. These fossils include remarkably detailed impressions of wings, exoskeletons, and even some internal structures that are rarely preserved elsewhere. Studying these minute fossils helps researchers understand how insect populations responded to dramatic climate shifts, providing clues about biodiversity and ecological resilience. Some of these insect remains date back tens of thousands of years, capturing evolutionary snapshots of species that once played crucial roles in pollination and the food chain. Despite their small size, these frozen insects are powerful storytellers. They remind us that even the most inconspicuous organisms can hold the keys to understanding our planet's dynamic past, and they challenge us to consider how life, in all of its varied forms, adapts and survives through the ages. Beyond the realms of biology and climate, Siberian ice has also preserved mysterious man-made artifacts that continue to puzzle historians. In various excavations, researchers have discovered tools, ornaments, and even fragments of what appear to be ceremonial objects, all embedded in the permafrost. These artifacts, some intricately crafted from metal and stone, offer clues about ancient human cultures and their technological prowess. Their design and craftsmanship often defy easy explanation, hinting at trade networks, cultural exchanges, and the deep-seated understanding of the natural world that we are only beginning to comprehend. Each object serves as a tangible link to human ingenuity, a snapshot of time when early inhabitants braved harsh climates with resourcefulness and creativity.
This is pretty bonkers. In 2006 and again in 2014, a NASA balloon experiment called Anita picked up super strange radio signals in Antarctica. These weren't the usual cosmic rays flying in from space, these were coming up from the ground. Something deep under the ice was firing off bursts of energy. And that's not how cosmic rays are supposed to behave. If anything, they should be stopped cold by all that rock and ice, but these just powered straight through. First, they tried to explain it away with reflections or errors in their instruments, but it turns out something strange might actually be going on. Some straight up said it might be proof of a new kind of particle we've never seen before, and of course, it didn't take long for alien theories to start flying around online. So far, no one's come up with a satisfying answer. They've ruled out known particles, and nothing else really fits. The signals are real though, we just don't know what's causing them. Antarctica is supposed to be this giant frozen wasteland, but deep under the ice, it's surprisingly active. There are entire areas where the heat is rising up from the Earth's crust, and it's not just warming things up a little, the heat is melting the bottom of the ice sheet, creating massive lakes and underground rivers. Lake Vostok, for example, is bigger than Lake Ontario and has been sealed off for millions of years. Some of this heat is coming from known sources, like old volcanoes buried under the ice, but in some places, the heat levels are so high they don't totally make sense. There's no clear explanation for where all of this is coming from. One area under the West Antarctic ice sheet is releasing about twice the usual heat you'd expect from the planet's crust. That heat is reshaping the base of the continent, and scientists think it might be speeding up ice loss. So now you got this frozen continent sitting on top of a bunch of unexplained hotspots, underground water systems, and maybe even living ecosystems sealed away for millions of years. You know what's not supposed to exist under 2 miles of solid ice? A huge mountain range. At least it's not what you'd expect anyway. But that's exactly what scientists found in East Antarctica. It's called the Gamburtsev Mountain Range. It's about the size of the European Alps. The whole thing is completely buried beneath the ice sheet. You'd never know it was there without radar. The mountains are old, maybe 500 million years old. But they still look fresh, which sounds like an odd statement, a fresh mountain. But see, normally mountains that old get worn down and smoothed out over time. These ones are still jagged and sharp. It's like they were preserved in a freezer. In fact, that's literally what happened. Scientists can't agree on how they formed or why they haven't eroded like everything else from that era. Some researchers think these mountains might have actually helped form the East Antarctic ice sheet in the first place. Like the ice started collecting there because of the landscape underneath. That makes it not just mysterious geologically, but also a big part of how Antarctica became what it is today. In 2006, NASA satellites scanning Antarctica's gravity field found something bizarre under the ice in a region called Wilkes Land. It was this massive gravity anomaly. Basically, a huge area where the gravity is stronger than it should be. The reading was so intense that researchers thought something super dense must be buried deep underground. The most mainstream theory is that it could be a massive asteroid impact crater around 300 miles wide. But if that's true, the asteroid would have been way bigger than the one that wiped out the dinosaurs, and the timing lines up with the Permian-Triassic extinction, also known as the Great Dying, where 90% of life on Earth vanished. Of course, there's no actual crater to look at, it's just ice and radar readings, but that hasn't stopped people from running some wild theories. Some say it's not an asteroid at all, but some sort of buried structure, possibly ancient, possibly alien. Could the gravity spike be caused by a giant underground base? Most scientists are sticking to the asteroid idea, but they also haven't drilled into it or confirmed anything. So for now, there's just a giant unexplained mass under Antarctica. Lake Vostok is one of the largest lakes in the world, and it's been completely sealed off under Antarctica's ice for millions of years. It sits under about 2.5 miles of ice. There's no sunlight, no air, and scientists didn't even know it was there until the 90s, when radar scans showed a flat line beneath the ice, which turned out to be liquid water. Here's what makes it so eerie. The lake is warm, not boiling or anything, but warm enough to stay liquid because of pressure from the ice above and heat rising up from the earth below. And since it's been isolated for so long, anything living in there could have evolved in total isolation. When Russian researchers finally drilled down and got a sample, they found some unusual bacteria, stuff that didn't match anything we know. Then things got a little weird. The lab that analyzed the bacteria later walked it back, saying it was probably contamination. But the damage was done. People were already running with it. And to this day, no one's fully explored the lake, but some scientists think there could be undiscovered species down there. So this one's been all over conspiracy channels. If you search Antarctica on Google Earth, there are a few ice-covered peaks that look suspiciously like pyramids. The most famous one is near the Ellsworth Mountains. It has 4 triangular faces like the ones in Egypt. It's so clean looking that some people are just convinced, well, this can't be natural. Scientists will tell you it's just a nunatak, basically a mountain peak poking through the ice. Erosion, wind, and the way snow settles over time can shape peaks into pyramid-like shapes. And that's totally fair, but here's the thing. There are a number of these pyramid-looking mountains scattered across different parts of the continent. Some are clustered weirdly close together, and they're all in places nobody's really explored up close. No one's drilled into them. No one's hiked up and taken detailed samples. So until someone does, people are gonna speculate. Is it possible they're the ruins of an ancient lost civilization? Could there be evidence that people or something else lived there thousands and thousands of years ago? I hope so. In the late 1930s, Germany sent an expedition to Antarctica and claimed a piece of land they called New Schwabenland, or New Swabia. That's a lot easier to say. Well, that's not even a conspiracy though. They even dropped swastika flags from planes and mapped the coastline. But after World War II, the story gets weird. According to some conspiracy theories, the Third Reich didn't just explore Antarctica, they set up a secret base there, carrying out disturbing experiments or reverse engineering buried alien technology. What really fuels this is how much effort they put into Antarctica. The German expedition had military ships, aircraft, and serious resources for a place with no obvious strategic value, unless they'd found something or were searching for something. After the war, rumors started flying about high-ranking Third Reich members escaping to Antarctica instead of South America. Well, I mentioned the US being in Antarctica in the 50s. Well, right after World War II, the US launched a massive military operation to Antarctica called Operation High Jump. It was led by Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd, a guy who had explored Antarctica before. There were 13 ships, 33 aircraft, and over 4,000 military personnel. The official story was that they were there testing gear and training for cold weather combat, but they pulled out after only 8 weeks. No one ever gave a solid reason why. That's where the rumors started. Some theories say they were looking for that hidden German base. Others go further and claim they encountered unidentified flying objects while flying near the coast. Byrd even made vague comments later about a threat that could fly from pole to pole at incredible speeds. There's never been any concrete proof of a run-in with something strange, but the size and secrecy surrounding this mission has left a lot of room for speculation. If you go poking around Antarctica on Google Earth, you'll eventually run into something weird. Chunks of the map that are blurred, smudged, or just cut out completely. And most people would write this off as a glitch, but some think these areas look suspiciously intentional. They're clear rectangles or odd shapes in the middle of nowhere, and there's no official explanation for why certain spots are censored or missing data. Some think these blurred out zones line up with entrances to underground tunnels, ancient ruins and bases. One of the more famous ones shows what looks like a massive hole in the ice, like a dark entrance carved into the side of a mountain. Google later patched over it, but not before screenshots started flying around Reddit and conspiracy forums. Is it just satellite stitching issues? Yeah, probably, but what's weird is how selective the blurring seems to be, and because so much of the continent is again off limits or ridiculously hard to reach, no one's really able to go check. So yeah, it could be nothing, or maybe not. Imagine you're standing on a frozen glacier and suddenly you see deep red water gushing out of the ice. Well, that is a real thing, and it's called the Blood Falls. It's been flowing out of the side of Taylor Glacier in Antarctica for over 100 years. For decades, no one had a clue what caused this. Turns out the water comes from a hidden reservoir trapped under the glacier that's been sealed off for millions of years. It's super salty and packed with iron. When the water finally seeps out and hits the air, the iron oxidizes. Basically, it rusts and turns red. That's the science part, but what makes it really weird is what's in that water. Researchers found microbes living in it, microbes that have survived without sunlight, oxygen, or fresh water, basically cut off from the world since before humans even existed. And it makes scientists wonder if similar life could exist in way harsher places, like under the ice on Mars, or in oceans beneath the crust of icy moons. So reports of strange sounds, often described as whistles, hums, or pings, have been documented in the Arctic. And one of the most famous cases involving a strange sound is the Arctic ping. Back in the summer of 2016, in a small Inuit hamlet called Igloolik in Nunavut, hunters started getting concerned about a strange ping noise coming from the Fury and Hecla Strait, which is a channel of water about 75 miles northwest of Igloolik. Now, the hunters' primary concern wasn't just how bizarre the sound was and the fact that they couldn't identify it, but the fact that it seemed to be scaring away the sea mammals in the area that they depend on. The sound seemed to be coming from the sea floor, and this wasn't just a few residents reporting the sound either. This was a big enough deal that the military was actually sent in to investigate, but they didn't find anything. One theory is that members of Greenpeace were somehow involved, creating the sound in order to scare off the animals from the hunters, but there's never been any definitive proof of that hypothesis. Next up, we have the Arctic UAPs. So just like with any remote area, the Arctic has its fair share of reported UFO sightings, and now some of these can be attributed to military activity or just misidentification of natural things, but some are still very much unexplained, and one of the biggest stories to come out recently is back in February of 2023 when all those UAPs were shot down over a bunch of different airspaces, mostly in Canada and the United States. News Nation just recently followed up on this story, saying that there were various sources claiming that there was a previously undisclosed encounter, 8 or 9 other UAPs, and this was right over the Arctic Circle. This was on February 1st, just a few days before the main objects had been shot down. Fighter jets were sent up from NORAD to engage with the objects, but the UAPs flew off at high speed, and no, they still aren't sure what these things were, unless they're just hiding that info from the public. Either way, it's pretty eerie stuff. Next up on the list, we have a very alarming discovery of viruses. Scientists have come across viruses like the Mola virus, for example, in the permafrost of the Arctic Circle. Permafrost is permanently frozen soil, and as it thaws, it exposes ancient layers, some of which contain ancient viruses. Mola virus is a type of giant virus, and the fact that viruses can linger deep within the ice, lying dormant for thousands of years and then unleash themselves on the world when they're thawed out, is a pretty freaky idea. Luckily, there haven't been any discovered so far that pose a serious threat to humans, but that doesn't mean that more potentially deadly ancient viruses won't rear their ugly head and become active as more permafrost starts to thaw. Who knows what could be locked away under there. If you are enjoying our channel so far, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button and leave your thoughts and comments down in the comments below. So speaking of these dormant viruses breaking free from melting Arctic ice, we have the very creepy case of the Siberian anthrax outbreak in 2016. And so unlike the dormant ancient viruses that I talked about before, this actually did affect human beings. Apparently this was caused by a heat wave thawed a 75-year-old reindeer carcass that had been infected with anthrax. The thawing process released dormant spores of the bacteria responsible for anthrax into the surrounding environment. The spores contaminated the soil and water sources nearby, and then local reindeer that were grazing on the contaminated land, of course, came into contact with these anthrax spores. Over 2,300 reindeer were infected. This then led to humans getting infected when they consumed the contaminated reindeer meat. About 100 people were hospitalized with anthrax exposure. One person even lost their life. So yeah, this was pretty freaky. Could have been much worse, but freaky nonetheless. Anthrax really is no joke. Just goes to show like how insidious dormant bacteria really is. So Greenland sharks are one of the largest shark species. They can grow to lengths of 24 feet, sometimes more. That's a big shark. You don't need me to tell you why that's scary. Now, here's something that I could not believe about these things. Greenland sharks have a very long lifespan. And when I say long, I mean like long. Again, I read this and was shocked. They live between 250 to 500 years. 500! That means there could be a Greenland shark swimming around up in the North Pole right now that's been alive since the 16th century. Just a handful of years after the Middle Ages. Blows my mind. These sharks have a bit of a creepy look to them as well, with a thick, robust body, a rounded snout, dark gray or black in color. Their eyes also have this pale, almost zombie kind of look to them. These are apex predators, their diet consisting of fish, seals, and other marine animals, and they live deep under the water at depths of around 650 to 3,000 feet, and they've been recorded even deeper than that. Next on the list is radioactive fallout. So in the 50s and 60s, a lot of nuclear testing took place, and this released a lot of radioactive material into the atmosphere. These tests, which were conducted both above and below ground, led to the dispersal of radioactive particles over long distances, and the Arctic region, even though it was far away from the primary testing sites, ended up accumulating a lot of this fallout, which was transported there through precipitation patterns before finally settling in the ice and snow. The fallout included Caesium-137 and Strontium-90, which stay radioactive for long periods of time, and they contaminated soil, water, and wildlife. And just like with those pesky viruses, as Arctic ice melts, there are concerns about these radioactive particles getting re-released, redistributing the fallout, and affecting local populations and wildlife. Negatively, of course. You know what's creepy? Corpses. Dead stuff. It's just icky. Ever thought of that? Yeah, this is very enlightening information I'm sharing with you right now. Well, even creepier are old but very well preserved corpses. Mummies. Well, the Arctic ice is a perfect environment for keeping corpses nice and cool, and that's why mummies are found in this part of the world all the time. In one case, in Greenland, the Arctic environment preserved all these mummified bodies, which dated back between 1475 and 1635. These human remains were found in burial sites, and the cold, dry conditions of the Arctic led to the natural mummification process. There have also been several remains of the crew of the doomed Franklin expedition dug up over the years. They look pretty freaky. I mean, if zombies actually started rising up from their graves, they'd basically look like these mummies, depending when they died, anyway. Next, we have the discovery of crashed planes from World War II. There have been a number of World War II planes found buried under Arctic ice over the years. Take one case in 1992, for example. During World War II, a P-38 Lightning fighter aircraft and two B-17 Flying Fortress bombers were part of the Lost Squadron, which encountered a blizzard while supporting the Allied war effort in the British Isles. Because of severe weather conditions, the aircraft were forced to make an emergency landing on the glaciers of Greenland in 1942. All the crew members did survive the emergency landing, but they had to endure very harsh conditions on the ice for 9 whole days before finally being rescued. The aircrafts, though, were left behind on the glacier. Over the following decades, the shifting ice sheets of Greenland gradually buried the planes under about 250 to 300 feet of ice. But then in 1992, one of the P-38 Lightning fighters was successfully extracted from the ice. This aircraft became known as Glacier Girl, and remarkably, despite being encased in ice for like half a century, the P-38 was actually restored to flying condition. Next on the list are Arctic sea ice circles. NASA scientists, during the Operation Icebridge mission over the Beaufort Sea in the Arctic, observed 3 holes in the sea ice surrounded by irregular circular shapes. It's still not entirely known what causes these circles, but some possibilities are seals or whales creating the holes, allowing water to flow out and from the circular shapes, or warm water bubbling up from below. These strange holes appear in an area of young, thin ice that was recently open water, with wave-like ripples on its surface. Arctic sea ice is composed of both multi-year and seasonal ice and has been diminishing and thinning over the years, particularly, as you can imagine, in the summer. The Arctic seems to be warming at twice the global average rate. Some scientists are predicting that the Arctic could be almost ice-free in the summer by the 2040s. Finally though, we have the release of methane. We talked about ancient viruses thawing out of the permafrost earlier in the video, but that's not the only concerning thing concealed deep within the layers of Arctic ice. So the Arctic region has vast amounts of permafrost, permanently frozen soil, and permafrost is thawing, so I guess it's not permanently frozen then, which is exposing organic matter that's been frozen for thousands of years, like dead plants and animals, like the eerily well-preserved Yucca mammoth found in Siberia back in 2010, for example. And when permafrost thaws, the previously frozen organic matter becomes available to bacteria, which then break it down, releasing methane. Is also released from the seafloor in some Arctic areas through seeps. These seeps can be natural, but things like oil drilling can also release methane, and a lot of scientists are concerned about this because excessive amounts of methane ain't great for the environment.
Starting off today in our number 10 spot, we have the magnetic anomalies. Navigators venturing into certain parts of the Arctic Ocean have reported their compasses going haywire, pointing in unexpected directions and making navigation a very tricky affair. These strange magnetic anomalies aren't just throwing off explorers, they're stirring up concern among scientists studying Earth's magnetic field. The magnetic North Pole has been drifting faster in recent years, and these Arctic oddities might be hints of deeper changes happening within our planet's core. This shift could have ripple effects on everything from navigation systems to the migratory patterns of animals that rely on Earth's magnetic cues. As researchers investigate these mysterious disturbances, they're very keen to uncover what's causing the magnetic mayhem and what it could mean for our technologically dependent world. Could these anomalies be early signs of significant changes in Earth's magnetic behavior? In our number 9 spot today, we have the hidden civilizations. Deep beneath the Arctic's icy veil, tales are emerging of ancient cities entombed in the frozen depths, sparking both excitement and fear among those who hear them. Explorers have reported glimpses of geometric shapes and structures beneath thinning ice sheets, formations that look eerily artificial. Some scientists on remote expeditions have picked up anomalous readings on their equipment, suggesting massive, unexplained objects lying on the ocean floor. Adding to the mystery, a few fishermen have hauled up peculiar artifacts in their nets, intricately carved stones and metallic devices etched with symbols that don't match any known language. While official explanations chalk these up to natural phenomena or modern debris, whispers grow louder that we might be uncovering the remnants of a civilization lost to time. As the Arctic ice continues to recede, one can't help but wonder, are we on the brink of rewriting history with discoveries hidden beneath the polar ice? In our number 8 spot today, we have the disappearances. Throughout history, the Arctic Ocean has swallowed entire expeditions without a trace, leaving behind only whispers of their mysterious fates. The Franklin expedition of the 19th century is perhaps the most haunting. 2 ships and 129 men vanished into the icy abyss, sparking countless theories but offering few answers. Recent findings of their eerily preserved ships beneath the frozen waters have raised more questions than they solve. Some artifacts hint at sudden madness among the crew, while local legends speak of malevolent forces guarding the polar realms. Modern explorers retracing their routes report unsettling phenomena, compasses spinning wildly, unearthly sounds echoing through the mist, and fleeting shadows beneath the ice that defy explanation. As scientists delve deeper into these anomalies, they're beginning to fear that the Arctic hides more than just harsh weather. It may conceal secrets that challenge our understanding of nature itself. In our number 7 spot today, we have the Paulinas. The Arctic Ocean is throwing scientists for a loop with the sudden appearance of massive Paulinas, huge patches of open water that inexplicably emerge in the midst of solid sea ice. These anomalies aren't just small gaps, some are large enough to be spotted by satellites, leaving experts scratching their heads. Marine life seems equally perplexed, with whales and seals venturing into these unexpected open waters while predators follow close behind, disrupting the natural order of the ecosystem. Some researchers speculate that hidden geothermal activity or shifting ocean currents might be tearing these holes into the ice, but no one really knows for sure. The rapid formation of these Paulinas is altering local climates, affecting everything from weather patterns to the migration of species. As the mysteries deepen, scientists are growing increasingly concerned. Could these startling events be signaling even more dramatic changes lurking beneath the Arctic's frozen surface? In our number 6 spot today, we have the frozen methane pingos. The Arctic Ocean is revealing yet another chilling secret. Enormous underwater mounds called frozen methane pingos that could be ticking time bombs beneath the ice. These mysterious hills, some towering as high as skyscrapers, are filled with pressurized methane gas trapped for millennia. Recent dives have shown these pingos bulging ominously, with cracks spiderwebbing across their surfaces and strange bubbles rising to the frigid surface waters. Scientists are alarmed because if one of these giants were to rupture, it could unleash a massive surge of methane, a greenhouse gas far more potent than carbon dioxide, into the atmosphere, potentially accelerating climate change overnight. Even more unsettling is the possibility of abrupt environmental shifts. Imagine entire ecosystems thrown into chaos by sudden temperature spikes or massive underwater landslides triggering tsunamis. Researchers are racing against time to understand these hidden behemoths before they decide to awaken. Could these frozen giants hold the key to a climatic domino effect no one is prepared for? In our number 5 spot today, we have the watermelon snow algae. Scientists are growing increasingly uneasy about a bizarre phenomenon that's turning the Arctic's once pristine ice sheets a haunting shade of red. Known colloquially as watermelon snow, this eerie coloration is caused by massive blooms of rare algae species. But it's not just the unsettling hue that's causing alarm. These crimson algae absorb more sunlight, dramatically accelerating the melting of the ice and disrupting the delicate balance of the Arctic ecosystem. What's more is that recent expeditions have reported that the areas affected seem to be expanding at an unnatural rate, with some researchers whispering about unknown factors fueling this explosive growth. Wildlife is acting strangely too. Polar bears avoiding their usual hunting grounds and migratory birds altering their flight paths to steer clear of the scarlet-stained ice. As the Arctic continues to bleed red, scientists fear we're witnessing the beginning of an environmental shift with consequences that we can't yet fully grasp. In our number 4 spot today, we are talking about the giant deep-sea creatures. Beneath the icy surface of the Arctic Ocean, rumors are swirling about colossal sea creatures that defy all scientific understanding, sending chills through the marine biology community. Local fishermen whisper about nets shredded by unseen giants and shadows that blot out the sunlight beneath their boats. Deep-sea explorers have reported anomalous readings, massive moving objects that vanish without a trace when approached. Some submersibles have even captured fleeting images of tentacles stretching into the darkness, or enormous fins slicing through the frigid waters. Scientists fear these could be prehistoric behemoths, awakened from eons of slumber by shifting climates and melting ice. The idea that such leviathans might be real is both exhilarating and absolutely terrifying, hinting at undiscovered links in the ocean's food chain. As research teams prepare to dive deeper than ever before, a daunting question hangs in the air. Are we ready to confront the monstrous mysteries that the thawing Arctic is beginning to unveil? In our number 3 spot today, we have the secret military installations. Rumors are swirling that the Arctic Ocean is concealing more than just ice and wildlife. Some believe it's home to secret military installations hidden beneath the frigid waters. Locals and explorers have reported unusual sightings: strange metallic structures peeking through the ice, unmarked vessels slipping silently through foggy nights, and mysterious transmissions interrupting radio signals. Even satellite images seem to blur or distort certain areas, fueling speculation that governments are masking something big. Scientists on research missions have stumbled upon restricted zones patrolled by unidentified personnel, and their equipment sometimes malfunctions without explanation. The strategic importance of the Arctic, with its untapped resources and new shipping lanes opening due to melting ice, makes these whispers even more intriguing. Could nations be quietly building underwater bases or testing advanced technologies away from prying eyes? The idea might sound like something out of a spy novel, but with so much at stake in this remote frontier, it's a question that keeps getting harder and harder to dismiss. In our number 2 spot today, we have the unusual light phenomena. Under the Arctic night sky, explorers and scientists are witnessing a mesmerizing yet unnerving spectacle of unexplained lights dancing across the horizon. These unusual light phenomena, often dubbed Arctic UFOs, flicker and swirl in patterns that defy natural explanations. While some attribute them to rare atmospheric conditions, shimmering auroras, or optical illusions created by ice crystals, others whisper about more mysterious origins. Reports describe lights moving in synchronized formations, changing colors with eerie precision, and sometimes hovering motionlessly before vanishing without a trace. Cameras and sensors occasionally capture these elusive displays, sparking intense debates among experts. Theories range from secret military experiments using advanced technologies to hints of extraterrestrial visitors observing our planet from the frozen depths. Locals share stories passed down through generations of strange lights guiding ships or signaling hidden dangers beneath the ice. As the Arctic continues to thaw and open up, these lights grow more frequent, leaving scientists both fascinated and fearful of what secrets the darkness might reveal. And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the Hollow Earth. Whispers of a hidden world beneath the Arctic ice have reignited one of the oldest and most tantalizing conspiracy theories: the existence of a hollow Earth. Adventurers and fringe theorists claim that massive entrances to this subterranean realm lie concealed at the poles, guarded by ancient forces or advanced technologies. Recent expeditions have stumbled upon inexplicable geological formations and vast unexplored caverns that some believe could be gateways to this mysterious inner world. Stories of eerie lights emanating from beneath the ice, coupled with unexplained seismic activity, only add fuel to this speculation. Locals share legends of secret passages and lost civilizations thriving in the darkness below, untouched by time. While mainstream science dismisses these claims as fanciful myths, the allure of discovering a hidden civilization or untapped resources keeps the mystery alive. As ice caps continue to melt and new areas become accessible, the possibility of uncovering something extraordinary captivates the imagination. Could there truly be an undiscovered world waiting beneath the frozen surface, or is this just another captivating chapter in the Arctic's long history of mysterious secrets?
And we are kicking things off with the 3,000-year-old arrow. This is a super recent discovery, just happened back in September. A glacial archaeologist named Espen Finstad was hiking through the Jotunheim Mountains in eastern Norway when he came across a wooden arrow. It was so well preserved that to the naked eye, it would probably look brand new. It even still had feathers on it. But Finstad estimated that this arrow was actually around 3,000 years old. He later determined it was likely used by a hunter in the late Stone Age to early Bronze Age. Finstad stated, "What makes the arrow so impressive is its preservation. Though it is broken into 3 parts, the arrow remains attached to the shaft, as do the feathers, known as fletchings, which help to stabilize the arrow's flight path." So this is just one of the many artifacts turning up once frozen under, thick layers of ice, not just in Norway, but in cold climates all around the world as glaciers continue to melt. If you are enjoying our content so far, if you're new here, hit that subscribe button and don't forget to leave your thoughts, your comments, complaints down below. I'll usually read them. At number 9, we have Mummy Juanita. Mummy Juanita, also known as the Ice Maiden or Lady of Ampato, is an exceptionally well-preserved mummy of an Inca girl which was discovered in 1995. The mummy was found on Mount Ampato, a dormant volcano in the Andes Mountains of southern Peru, by anthropologist Johann Reinhard and his team. Mummy Juanita is believed to have lived during the Inca Empire, making her one of the best preserved ancient bodies ever found. She was approximately 12 to 14 years old at the time of her death. The mummy was found at an altitude of about 20,600 feet, and her discovery was kinda accidental. Reinhard and his team were actually on a mission to recover another Inca mummy when they stumbled on her in a crevice. She was wrapped in several layers of colorful textiles and buried with various offerings, including ceramic and metal objects, food items, and small statues. She was probably sacrificed as an offering to the Inca gods. The mummy is currently on display in the Catholic University of Santa Maria's Museum of Andean Sanctuaries in Peru. So get over there immediately. Tap on her glass encasing and tell her Uncle James said hello. First person in the comments to do that will receive a wink emoji from me and a $10 gift certificate to Walden Books. Number 8, the Mammoth Mummy. No, this is not a giant-sized human mummy. That would be pretty awesome. This is pretty awesome too, but it's a mummified woolly mammoth. In 2010, a team of Russian scientists found a well-preserved mammoth in Siberia, later named Yuka. She was a young mammoth, about 6 to 8 years old, and lived around 39,000 years ago. Yuka's body was in really good shape. Its body measured about 2.5 meters in length, and it was remarkably intact, with her trunk, bones, some of her flesh, hair, and even eyes still preserved, making her one of the most well-preserved mammoth specimens ever found. It's pretty incredible to see, not that I've ever seen it in person, but based on pictures and video that I have seen of it, crazy how well preserved it is. Finding a dinosaur in this condition would be absolutely unreal. Anyway, they think she might have fallen into a mud pit or drowned, which helped to preserve her so well. People probably butchered her for meat, as there were cut marks on her bones. Scientists studied her DNA to learn more about mammoths and their connection to modern elephants. Right now, Yuka is currently being held in Moscow. Next up, we have the Greenland Norse textiles. These textiles are a collection of ancient fragments discovered in 1921 in various archaeological sites in Greenland. The textiles provided insights into the types of clothing and weaving techniques of the Norse settlers who lived in Greenland during the medieval period. The sites where these fabrics were found are part of the remnants of Norse settlements in Greenland, which thrived between the 10th and 15th centuries. Fabrics discovered include woolen garments and household items. They were remarkably well preserved due to the cold and dry climate of Greenland, which helped prevent decay. The textiles had a bunch of different weaving patterns, colors, and designs that reflected the skill and artistry of the Norse weavers back in the day. It's interesting to see what their clothing looked like beyond depictions of them in ancient artwork. These fabrics have also been useful in understanding the challenges faced by the Norse settlers in Greenland and how they adapted to the harsh environment. And at number 6, we have the Kostenki 17 artifacts. The Kostenki 17 artifacts were discovered at the Kostenki site in Russia, an archaeological site known for its wealth of Upper Paleolithic finds. The artifacts discovered at the site include bone and antler tools, bone ornaments, and various artifacts made from organic materials. Archaeologists dug up a number of bone and antler tools like spear points, knives, and needles, tools that had been crafted with remarkable precision. They also found ornaments made from bone like beads and pendants. On top of that, there were plenty of hunting tools like projectile points, along with bones of animals that they had hunted. Some other notable discoveries at the site were engraved objects and fragments. These engravings often depict animals in geometric patterns, showcasing the type of artwork they would have made at the time. At our number 5 spot, we have the Siberian Ice Maiden, also known as the Princess of Ukok or the Altai Princess. This is a mummy of a young woman that was discovered in 1993 in the Ukok Plateau of the Altai Mountains in Siberia. The Siberian Ice Maiden was discovered by Russian archaeologist Natalia Polosmak in a tomb on the Ukok Plateau. The site was located at an altitude about 8,200 feet. The mummy is believed to date back to around 500 BC, making her approximately 2,500 years old. The mummy was found in a wooden sarcophagus covered with felt blankets and a cowhide rug. She was dressed in intricately woven garments made of wool and felt that was also adorned with jewelry, earrings, a necklace, various ornaments made of gold and other precious metal, so it's likely she held a high social status within the community. Her burial seemed to have been part of a complex ritual too, which led the archaeologists to believe she could have been a priestess or a noblewoman. Number 4, the Antarctic brown bear. 2019, scientists made a pretty cool discovery in Siberia. A thousands-year-old brown bear carcass preserved in the permafrost. The ancient brown bear carcass was discovered by reindeer herders. It was incredibly well preserved because of the permafrost conditions, which prevented decay. The carcass dates back approximately 3,500 years, placing it in the late Bronze Age. This age estimation was made through radiocarbon dating, a technique used to determine the age of organic materials based on their content of carbon-14 isotopes. Next on the list is Quede Dan Shinichi, which was the name given to a remarkably well-preserved body discovered at the Tatshenshini Alaska Provincial Park in British Columbia, Canada. Quede Dan Shinichi was discovered by hunters in the remote wilderness northwestern British Columbia. The body was found partially buried in the ice, surrounded by a variety of artifacts. He was believed to have lived over 550 years ago, around the early 15th century, a member of one of the indigenous tribes that inhabited the region during that time. The body's preservation was due to the glacier ice, which acted as a natural freezer, protecting the remains from decomposition. And along with the body, again, a variety of artifacts were discovered. There was a robe made from animal hides, a spruce root hat, a woven mat, a walking stick, various tools made from stone and bone. The body was then ceremonially reburied in 2000 following traditional rituals and protocols. Coming in at number 2, we have the Landbreen tunic. In 2011, during archaeological excavations in Landbreen, Norway, this ancient piece of clothing was discovered. The tunic was a remarkable archaeological find, revealing more information about ancient Norse clothing and textile techniques. The Landbreen site in the mountains of Norway was once frequented by travelers during the Roman Iron Age, approximately 300 to 500 AD. Because of the ice and snow in the region, many artifacts, including textiles, have been incredibly well preserved. And the tunic, it's made of wool, dates back to around 230 AD. It's a tunic-style garment with a natural brown color, a simple design. It has a twill weave, a pattern commonly used in textiles in that era. Just think of how much of our clothing, by the way, is going to be left behind after we eventually leave Earth or go extinct, let alone all our other crap. We churn out so much stuff on a constant basis, more so than at any point in history. I think finding stuff from this era is going to be so common in the future that it'll be more of a nuisance rather than a remarkable find. Finally though, taking that number 1 spot is Otzi the Iceman. Now, why is this number 1? I don't know, not really any particular ranking going on here, just a good one to close off with. In September of 1991, hikers Helmut and Erika Simon stumbled upon a well-preserved human corpse high in the Alps near the border of Austria and Italy. Later known as Otzi the Iceman, the two hikers saw the remains and actually thought he could have died relatively recently. But no, Otzi was an ancient human who had lived over 5,000 years ago during the late Neolithic period. He was so well preserved because he'd been encased in ice for that thousands and thousands of years. His body was found in the Ötztal Alps. The discovery site was in the Schnalzalval-Sanalis Valley, a region that was once covered by glaciers completely. Scientists discovered that Otzi lived between 3359 and 3105 BCE, making him one of the oldest and most well-preserved naturally mummified humans ever found. He was 5'5" and weighed around 110 pounds. The age at the time of his death was estimated to be around 45 years old. Besides his body, researchers also found a bunch of artifacts and clothing items with him. A copper axe, a quiver of arrows, a bearskin cap, and a coat made of woven grass and hide. Otzi's remains and belongings are currently housed in the South Tyrol Museum of Archaeology in Bolzano, Italy.
Coming in at number 10 is the Iceman. The mummy of Otzi, aka the Iceman, was found in 1991 in the Ötztal Alps, Italy. It's believed that the Iceman belonged to 3000 BCE and his body was preserved because of the glacier that surrounded him after he died. Evidence suggests that he had his life ended by someone due to presence of several wounds and an arrowhead embedded in his shoulder. His life and the circumstances surrounding his death remain among the most significant European mysteries. Now, however, soon after his discovery, people who were involved with his discovery began to die due to violent accidents. Forensic pathologist Rainer Henn died in a horrific car accident, mountaineer Kurt Fritz died in an avalanche, and hiker Helmut Simon died after falling off a dangerous hidden path. The Iceman then claimed 3 more lives in quick succession between 2004 and 2005. Now, it's thought that anyone who comes into contact with the Iceman will die, and people believe that the discovery of the Iceman is a curse and has the power to destroy mankind. All I'm saying is, I would never get close to him. Number 9. Viruses. One major fear of global warming is that it could release unknown pathogens into the air, some of which may have the capacity to seriously hinder and endanger humanity. Now, a lung sample from a woman's body exhumed in 1997 from permafrost in a village on the Seaward Peninsula of Alaska contained genomic material from the influenza strain responsible for the 1918 pandemic. In 2012, scientists confirmed the 300-year-old mummified remains of a woman buried in Siberia contained the genetic signatures of the virus that causes smallpox. An anthrax outbreak in Siberia that affected dozens of humans and more than 2,000 reindeer between July and August in 2016 has also been linked to the deeper thawing of permafrost during exceptionally hot summers, allowing old spores of Bacillus anthracis to resurface from old burial grounds or animal carcasses. In 2015, researchers from China and the United States traveled to Galia ice cap in Tibet and drilled a 164-foot hole into the ice to study samples. What they found was no less than 33 different viruses, 28 of which had never been seen by human eyes. According to environmental virologist Chantal Abergel, we are very far from sampling the entire diversity of viruses on Earth. Now, that's positively unsettling considering there were 28 found in a Tibetan glacier alone. Number 8. Whiskey. Explorer Ernest Shackleton was one of the key figures in the heroic age of Antarctic exploration. Shackleton dreamed of being the first to reach the South Pole, but lost that race to Roald Amundsen, although that didn't stop him from exploring the icy region. One of his most heroic acts occurred after his ship, the Endurance, became stuck in ice. He saved each crew member with bravery, quick thinking, and strong leadership. Now, on another trip in 1909, Shackleton left behind 3 cases of scotch and 2 cases of brandy. He intended to enjoy the alcohol on his return, but sadly Shackleton never got the chance as he died of a heart attack on return to his voyage to Antarctica in 1921. Now, almost 100 years later, in 2010, workers in the Antarctic found Shackleton's bottles of alcohol frozen in the ice, aged to perfection. Number 7. Lake Vostok. In the late 1950s, the Soviet Union established the Vostok Station at the pole of cold on Princess Elizabeth Land in Antarctica. As researchers checked the thickness of the ice, they were shocked to discover Lake Vostok 13,000 feet below the ice surface. Russian scientists believe the lake was isolated roughly 15 to 25 million years ago. With a thick Antarctic sheet covering the lake, it remained untouched for centuries. Research on the ice and lake provided scientists with insight into the Earth's history. Now the Russian team plans to eventually lower a probe into the lake to collect water samples and sediments from the bottom. It's hypothesized that unusual forms of life could be found in the lake's liquid layer, a fossil water reserve. Now because Lake Vostok may contain an environment sealed off below the ice for millions of years, the conditions could resemble those of ice-covered oceans hypothesized to exist on Jupiter and Saturn's moon. Number 6. Yucca the Mammoth. Yucca the Mammoth is a mummified corpse of a juvenile female woolly mammoth that was found near and named after the village Yucca whose local people discovered it. This mammoth mummy was found as an overhanging ledge about 13 feet above the beach level in a low wave cut bluff that was about 16 feet high. Found in 2010, the mammoth died approximately 39,000 years ago. After its discovery, Yucca spent 2 years stored and preserved in a natural refrigerator, the local permafrost of Yucca. An analysis of the teeth and tusks determined Yucca to be approximately 6 to 8 years old when it died, coming in at about 5 tons. Now, although it's presumed that this mammoth had most likely been attacked by lions or other predators, evidence that the predators had killed the mammoth was not found. In March 2019, a Japanese researcher team led by Kazuo Yamagata, a biologist at Kundai University, worked with Yucca's tissue. Yamagata's team reported that they were able to simulate nucleus-like structures to perform some biological processes. However, they cannot activate cell division. Yucca is now on display in Moscow, and it is quite creepy to say the least. It's considered the best preserved mammoth in the world, and you can clearly see why. Number 5. Mother-daughter mummies. In 2017, archaeologists found mummies buried in the Zelny Yar burial site near the Russian town of Skalkard. They found 2 mummies, one adult woman and the other her daughter. These mummies are estimated to be 900 years old and are said to be part of an unknown medieval culture. The interesting thing was that the female mummy is the only female in the burial ground, leading some to assume that she was an elite member of society. It's also interesting and creepy because only her head has been preserved. On the head you can still see her hair and eyelashes, and her face has a green tint due to the copper she was buried in. By finding this, the team who found them will be better able to understand the little known civilization that lived in this region between the 8th and 13th centuries. Between the 8th and 13th centuries AD. Alexander Gustav, expedition leader, said the remains were found near one of the 3 monuments at Zelny Yar. They were buried in a north-south direction, their feet facing a river, the significance of which is thought to be religious. Now, who these people were and how they ended up on the edge of the Arctic is not known, but previous DNA analysis has shown them to have links to Persia. Researchers are currently working to connect the civilization to local indigenous populations living in the region today. Number 4. Fish. The freezing of an animal, insect, or fish can happen at any moment when the temperature suddenly drops and everything begins to freeze. Now this is what happened when 2 brothers went fishing on a Wawasee Lake in Indiana a few years ago after a cold snap. They made a startling, bizarre, and mysterious discovery. They found a pike frozen in the ice of the lake. Now in most cases a frozen fish isn't a big deal, however the pike died in the middle of eating a bass. The most probable theory suggests that the pike choked on the bass, died, and was frozen in time, the 2 fish entwined together forever. Now at first nobody believed the 2 brothers on social media, most assumed it to be a special effect or joke, but they released graphic footage of them cutting the pike and half-eaten bass out of the ice, much to the surprise of their followers. Now it's unknown how long it was frozen for, but I can't imagine finding something like that. Number 3. Dinosaur bones. It turns out that many dinosaur bones have been found in the frozen tundra of the Antarctic. The first were discovered in 1986 by Argentinian geologists Eduardo Olivero and Roberto Sasco, who unearthed remains of the ankylosaur. These bones were found on James Ross Island and were bones of a Tinosaura. Other dinosaurs are continuously found in Antarctica as well, but it's not like these dinosaurs were roaming on an icy landscape. Antarctica as we know it only formed about 25 million years ago, long after the dinosaurs had gone extinct. Before that, it was a part of the supercontinent called Gondwana, and it was actually quite tropical. Number 2. The meteorite. In 2021, research assistant Matthias van Gilliken was working at the Belgian Princess Elizabeth Antarctica station when he made a shocking discovery. He discovered 13 black particles at the Ronan Mountains, Queen Maud Land, and East Antarctica. The scientists soon realized it was pieces of a meteorite. They theorized that the meteorite was barreling towards Earth roughly 430,000 years ago and exploded in the sky above East Antarctica when it entered the atmosphere. Then earlier in 2015, NASA scientists found a small meteorite that fell to Earth 13 years earlier, landing in the icy cold Antarctica. Now, evidence suggests that the object contained microbes from Mars. And coming in at number 1 is million-year-old DNA. In the fall of 2022, scientists announced that they uncovered million-year-old DNA just north of the continent of Antarctica. Scientists actually accidentally collected the unusual genetic samples up to 584 feet beneath the sea floor as part of a 2019 survey led by the International Ocean Discovery Program in the Scotia Sea north of mainland Antarctica. The ancient sediment that was discovered is now the oldest marine DNA found from seafloor sediments. The team looked closely at damage patterns within the recovered DNA fragments to establish exactly how old they were. Now, the oldest fragments clocked in at around 1 million years old. Now, until now, the oldest set of DNA, which was found locked inside Arctic permafrost, dated around 650,000 years ago. This DNA will be analyzed and studied by scientists, as it will tell us a lot about the polar marine ecosystem as well as how climate change may affect Antarctica.
Starting us off at number 10, we have frozen bones. One of the most terrifying things that can be found buried in ice has to be human bones. I mean, it's one thing to find a mummy, which is still spooky, but at least they are usually placed there on purpose. These bones, however, have a little more mystery behind them. Back in 1942, a forest guard was out patrolling near the Himalayas when he stumbled across thousands of human bones where the frozen lake had thawed. It was a terrifying sight to say the least, and at first many speculated the remains to belong to the deceased Japanese soldiers of World War II. However, it was discovered the remains dated back much earlier than that. These remains actually dated back to 850 AD, but the cause of death was still very much up for debate. According to an urban legend, the men were celebrating and their celebration disturbed a deity, who then sent hail down on the men, ending their celebration and their lives. And while there might be a bit more fiction than fact to that story, happening upon a slew of random creepy bones that were left buried under a frozen lake is still a pretty scary afternoon. Coming in at number 9, mysterious images. In 2013, a group of conservationists were reconstructing huts in the Arctic when they ran across a lockbox frozen in a block of ice. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if I were to come across a locked box frozen in a block of ice, I would probably take a moment and think before I opened it, as I'm pretty sure that is how every horror movie with an evil curse starts. But thankfully, inside this box was just a few black and white photos. That being said, however, the photos themselves were not completely innocent. Once the images were formatted to be visible, they realized they had come from Ernest Shackleton's 1914 expedition, and the photos depicted several nerve-wracking moments from the trip, including their ship stuck and sinking in the ice. Hopefully there wasn't anything more sinister locked inside that box with them. Next up at number 8, alien markings. Now, it wouldn't be a scary top 10 video without a little sprinkle of alien conspiracy, now would it? So let me know what you guys think of this one, will you? Apparently, 2 friends were walking along a frozen lake in Utah and made a strange discovery when they came across a strange formation. According to the friends, small holes could be seen poking out from the ice, along with an odd formation lying underneath. Now, they speculated that it was some kind of debris left behind by aliens visiting the planet, while others online think it could have been a designated UFO landing spot. But the strangest theory is that they are alien eggs that were planted on the surface of the ice, which, if I'm understanding correctly, would mean aliens aliens are trying to overtake the planet by secretly implanting eggs in the ice. According to skeptics, this strange sighting could also be spilt coffee, salt that was used for ice fishing, or most plainly, a natural ice formation. So what do you think? Is it a secret alien egg farm, or just people losing their minds? Coming in at number 7, an ancient virus. It's not every day you think you're gonna find a prehistoric virus buried 100 feet deep in Arctic permafrost, but back in 2014, in the depths of icy Siberia, 2 researchers did exactly that. The ancient virus, named Pithovirus, is believed to date back 30,000 years and has remained completely untouched in its hibernation, but still completely active and capable of infecting amoeba. According to people much smarter than me, it's apparently a giant virus containing 500 genes, which is insane considering HIV only contains 12. However, there is no need to start panicking just yet. Luckily, experts believe it is very difficult to actually be infected by this virus as a human, although technically it wouldn't be impossible. Good thing I'm not planning on visiting Siberia anytime soon. Coming in at number 6, a message in a bottle. Now, this one is frankly as depressing as it is scary, but terrifying discoveries come in all kinds of ways. So back in 1959, before the reality of melting glaciers and the climate crisis were fully understood or even really believed, a geologist by the name of Paul T. Walker decided to take matters into his own hands. He decided to put a note in a bottle instructing the finder to measure the distance from the bottle to the edge of the glacier and buried it in the frozen area. Fast forward to 2013, and 2 researchers uncovered this bottle encased in ice and decided to follow the directions Walker had left behind. Disturbingly, their findings revealed that the glacier had retracted over 200 feet since Walker wrote his note 54 years prior, proving the reality that so many wished was not true. Now, it's been 10 years since the 2013 discovery, and I worry how much it's moved since then. So yeah, scary in the sense that our Earth is melting at an insanely fast rate, and people still don't think the climate crisis should be a concern. Coming in at number 5, HMS Terror. You may or may not have heard of Sir John Franklin, the 19th century naval commander who set out to find the Northwest Passage. Either way, unlike some of the explorers of his time, he was actually incredibly prepared. The famous HMS Terror ship was a converted bomb vessel that had survived the War of 1812, and upon his Arctic expedition, he decided to reinforce the ship with iron plating to crush the thick layers of ice. From there, he stocked up with 3 years of food, and Sir Franklin and his 134 crew members boarded 2 ships and set sail. However, despite their best efforts, they were no match for the harsh conditions. The ship was lost to the Arctic, and its whereabouts remained a complete mystery. That was until August of 2016, when members of Arctic Research Foundation on their own expedition found the ship preserved under the ice. Now, the horrifying part comes when historians were able to piece together what their last days on the vessel could have looked like. Assumed to have been trapped by the ice for over a year and a half, the crew was dropping like flies, including their captain. The remaining survivors decided to abandon the ship and take their chances on foot, planning to reach a remote fur trading outpost several hundred miles away. But with no food, water, or resources left, the crew was left with but one thing to keep them alive: each other's flesh. There were no survivors, but many bodies remained mummified from the permafrost, allowing historians to learn about what really happened on the infamous HMS Terror. Coming in at number 4, a woman. Speaking of terrifying human remains found buried in the deep glacial ice, I have yet another mummy to add to our list of spooky finds. However, this one has a few extra creepy details. Discovered over 20,000 feet above sea level on the edge of a volcano was the mummy of an Incan teenager accompanied by what can be assumed was the rest of her young family. And creepily, it's said she was so well preserved that she still had lice in her hair. Now, due to her incredible preservation, there were several interesting things that researchers were able to confirm. She suffered from tuberculosis, for example, and it was found she'd been regularly eating coca leaves as well as copious amounts of alcohol prior to her death. But interestingly, that's not what killed her. It's assumed that 500 years ago, she and the others were given the drugs and alcohol to make them more compliant in the ritual that ultimately ended their lives. And evidence suggests that she was sacrificed to the volcano in a traditional practice. Now, while part of this is cool, historically speaking, it's also a bit terrifying, as you never know what kind of ancient curse could have been unearthed along with her. Coming in at number 3, a deadly virus. It's not just an ancient virus that has been found hiding in the frost. Back in 2016, due to the rising temperatures in the Arctic, the usually frozen ground was beginning to thaw. Initially though, no one thought much of it, but what ended up happening was an anthrax outbreak that killed 1 person and hospitalized 72. The cause? Well, apparently the local groundwater became contaminated by thawing deer cadavers who had once died from the infection. However, the most terrifying part of this is the precedent it sets for the future. Because of the cold temperatures in the Arctic, many viruses can stay perfectly preserved in the bloodstream, as was discovered in 1918 when 6 young men who had died from the Spanish flu were found with the active virus in their blood. So as the Earth heats, there's worry that the buried bodies from deadly diseases like smallpox could begin to infect the living if the temperatures continue to rise, melting the frozen graves. Coming in at number 2, a secret military base. In October of 2016, Russian scientists uncovered something truly shocking. It turns out back in World War II, he who shall not be named and his band of military followers built a secret military base in the depths of the Russian Icelands soon after their invasion of Russia. Located on Alexandra Land, it is not known for sure exactly what the purpose of the bunker was. Some believe it was to learn about and become acquainted with the harsh weather conditions to be able to better attack when the time came, though some believe the leader sought out ancient relics he believed would give him great power. Upon its 2016 discovery, 500 different artifacts were found, including old weapons and documents pertaining to World War II. As with just about all frozen discoveries, the artifacts remained in excellent condition due to the extremely low temperatures. But that doesn't make this super secret war bunker any less creepy. For all we know, it could be haunted by the terrifying soldiers who once occupied it. And last up today in our number 1 spot, Otzi the Iceman. Discovered in 1991 by 2 German hikers in the Ötztal Alps, Otzi is an incredibly well-preserved mummy of a man dating back to around 3300 BC. Now, are mummies inherently cursed and evil? No, but am I ever surprised when one turns out to be? Also, no. Apparently, after the Iceman's discovery in 1991, the forensic scientist on the case, Rainer Henn, who also happened to be the first scientist to touch the cursed mummy, died in 1992 en route to a conference where he was planning to report his findings. Shortly after, one of the mountaineers who helped Dr. Henn to reach Otzi's remains died when a large rock fell and blew into his skull. Plus, the journalist who filmed Otzi's extraction ended up dying of a brain tumor, and it only gets worse from there. One of the hikers that originally discovered the mummy, Helmut Simon, disappeared for some time, only to be found at the base of a 300-foot cliff, and the man who found his corpse died while attending his funeral. Plus, Conrad Spindler, who was at the time the leading expert on the Iceman, went on record claiming that the curse was a hoax, and that if it were true, he would be the next one to die, only to be found dead days later. Lastly, one of the other scientists who discovered too much about Otzi was found dead in his home with no reasonable explanation for his passing. So, after 7 deaths from people that either knew too much about Otzi or questioned the curse, I can safely say I never want to see this mummy as long as I live.